Every single Norwegian citizen, babies, grandparents, everyone technically has $320,000.
That's right, more than $250,000 each sitting in their country's investment fund.
Meanwhile, every Canadian citizen gets zero.
And if you're thinking, hey, but we have CPP, we have pensions, you're right. But here's the thing. Norwegians get both. They have generous pensions and at least $300,000 each. Both countries have oil. Both are wealthy, developed nations. So why does Norway have nearly $2 trillion growing on top of their social programs, while Canada has, well, a huge debt?
Let's talk about the biggest financial mistake Canada never talks about, and whether it's too late to fix it.
Here's what blew our minds when we started researching this. Back in 1970s, both Norway and Canada have begun their massive oil journeys. It happened around at the same time. Norway said,
"Let's save this money for future generations."
Canada said,
"Let's spend it now on tax cuts and public services."
Fast forward 50 years, and that decision created a $1.4 trillion difference. But here's what it gets more curious. Countries that don't even have oil, like the UK, France, are now scrambling to create these funds too, because they have figured out something that might change everything.
There is a way for governments to turn every dollar into $3, $4, $5, or even $7 over the 30-year time. But Canada, while sitting on some of the world's largest natural resources, is basically leaving this money on the table.
Today, that Norwegian fund owns 1.5% of all global stocks. They own pieces of Apple, Microsoft, Nestle. Basically, that's 1% of the world's corporations. Every Norwegian is technically a millionaire on paper if you use their currency, kroner.
In Norway, we say that we can buy Sweden if we want to, but we don't want to.
But they're not spending it. They barely even touch the money that they put in. They only spend about 3% each year, which means that the fund keeps growing while funding at least 20% of the Norway's budget. We're talking about universal healthcare, free education, and social programs.
What about Canada's approach? We found oil, we found gas, we found rare minerals. But instead of saving the money, we spend it immediately on government programs and tax cuts.
And look, some of that was really good spending, but we missed on the bigger picture while racing to please the voters. If Canada had done what Norway did starting 1980, we'd have an estimated 200, 400, or maybe even 800 billion fund today. It's obviously hard to estimate because the fund never happened, but we can approximate using the example of Norway. Either one of these numbers would be enough to eliminate our national debt, while still funding things like universal pharmacare, dental care, and maybe even childcare.
But that never happened. So instead, we're debating whether we can afford these programs, while Norwegians get them automatically from their investment returns.
It's not too late for Canada. And other countries are realizing that you don't need oil to create these funds anymore even. The UK has just launched a national wealth fund while still running a deficit. France has one too. Even individual US states are already considering it.
The secret is in the sheer math and how capital markets work. If you can borrow money at a lower interest and invest it to make higher returns, you're making free money. It's not risk-free, but it's a viable option if done right.
Singapore shows how this can work. They use returns from their sovereign wealth funds to fund about 20% of their government budget. This allows them to keep taxes relatively low while maintaining excellent public services. As a result, it's one of the safest and richest countries in the world.
Now you're probably thinking, but Canada and Singapore are two different countries to compare.
Sure, Singapore is a tiny tropical country with no natural resources, but Canada is massive, cold, and rich in abundant resources.
But size and climate don't change the math. Discipline, saving, and investing works everywhere. That's why I like the Norway example so much. It's a resource-rich country with a harsh climate, difficult landscape. They still built a massive oil fund. I would still argue Canada has a much bigger upside. We have more resources than most countries on the planet. Oil, gas, minerals, fresh water, lumber. Yet, we never set up a national wealth fund. If a small city-state can cover 20% of its budget this way, imagine what Canada could have built.
Imagine Canada creates a fund. seeds it with resource revenues and strategic borrowing. In 20 years, that fund is making university tuition free for every Canadian. In 30 years, it's so large that taxes become optional for most Canadians.
Your kids, your grandkids, they could inherit a country where the government's investments work for them, not the other way around.
Now, let's be real. This isn't a magic solution. And there are legitimate concerns. Where would the initial money come from? How do we prevent politicians from raiding it when the times get rough? Can we even trust the government enough to not raid the funds themselves? We don't have to look far for cautionary tales. Alberta actually created their own Heritage Savings Trust Fund back in 1976. It was supposed to be Canada's version of Norway's fund. Several independent analyses show that the fund could have been far larger under stricter saving rules. What should have been a more than $200 billion fund today is only worth about $27 billion. That's the difference between disciplined long-term thinking and short-term political pressures. Alberta proved that we can create these funds in Canada, but also showed us exactly how not to manage them.
And internationally, some countries have bungled this even more spectacularly. In Russia, for instance, state-controlled funds have ended up bolstering political insiders and oligarchs, rather than public welfare. And in places like Angola and Equatorial Guinea, resource money from sovereign funds has vanished into corrupt networks and shell companies.
Corruption is not bad. Corruption is only bad if I'm not involved.
But Canada has something that many of those countries don't: strong institutions, transparent governance, and a somewhat of a track record of long-term thinking, if the leadership is right. We already manage massive pension funds. We just need to be better at it.
The Canada Pension Plan Investment Board manages $714 billion. But hold your horses.
Don't push the horses.
It's not doing great. It's actually underperformed the market in the 5-year horizon. So we kind of know how to do this. We just need the political will to think beyond the next election cycle.
So here's my question for you. Should Canada create a sovereign wealth fund? And more importantly, what would you want to invest in? Clean energy, technology, global markets? Maybe a little bit of everything.
Let us know in the comments below. I am genuinely curious to know what you think.
And here's what we'd like you to do. Share this video with someone who cares about Canada's future. Because this conversation needs to happen beyond YouTube.
If we can get enough people talking about this, maybe, just maybe, we can turn this missed opportunity into Canada's greatest financial decision.
But only if we act now, while we still have time to build something incredible for the next generation.
Thank you for exploring this topic with us. If you want more videos about building a better, brighter future for Canada, click subscribe and the bell button because we're just getting started.
Make sure to also subscribe to our newsletter updates, where we share the most relevant news, tips, and updates on how to excel and thrive in Canada.
If you want to support this channel further, you can join our Patreon or YouTube memberships.
And if the YouTube algorithm got it right, you will most likely enjoy this video next. So we'll see you there.
Take care.